Coming up next on Public Access TV is Fan to Fan, the book game, where we look at the game of publishing books. Today my guests are Lynne Damianos, owner of Damianos Book Publishing in Saxonville, along with 3 members of a team from the First Parish in Framingham, a Unitarian Universalist congregation, working to create a book titled Solitude, Community, Hope, an anthology about loneliness in today's world. Stay tuned, it will make you think, and then make you want to get off the couch, go out the door, and join a group. This is Fan to Fan, the book game. I'm your host, Dave Hornfischer, a fan of books and community. And today I'm excited to look at the game of book publishing, where we talk to people who got their book ideas into print and those who helped them do it. Today I'm pleased to welcome back Saxonville publisher Lynne Damianos, along with 3 members of a team from First Parish in Framingham, a Unitarian Universalist congregation, to talk about their efforts to assemble Solitude, Community, Hope, an anthology about these 3 facets of our lives in today's post-pandemic high-tech world. Lynne, welcome back.
Thank you,
First, give us an overview of this project.
Well, I came out of church one day after a sermon having to do with the epidemic of loneliness, and I knew that we wanted to create some fundraisers for the church. And I thought, why not publish a book and invite community members to submit artwork, poetry, prose to it. And so it will be a community effort, and it will help support community causes.
So how did you and others put together this project?
Well, it started out with an idea after hearing one of Reverend Aaron's sermons about the epidemic of loneliness and the need for community. I thought, why not create a book as a fundraiser, and we could actually help support some of the community efforts that the church makes in the Metro West area. So that's how it started. And then we got a team of people together, mostly all volunteers, to create the book.
So how did you put together this team? We have an image here of the team coming up, and maybe you can talk a little bit about each one of them.
Sure. Yeah. Well, what I wanted to do is find volunteers from the church if possible. And so I started out with Greg Wells, who is one of the project managers who helped coordinate everything along with me. We knew that we really didn't have a professional editor in the group, so we had Brett Peruzzi from Peruzzi Communications, who I've worked with many, many times. So he stepped forward and agreed to help us out with the project. And then, of course, Reverend Aaron had a lot of ideas about Solitude, community, et cetera. And he's also an author himself, so I knew he would like to contribute. I am the publisher, so I helped coordinate the pieces and actually get the book printed. Joanne Sarkar designed the book itself. She'll talk more about that. Karen Greenberger does a lot of social media to help promote the book. Marianne Orlando is the illustrator of the cover and also some of the illustrations inside, also helping out with marketing. Margie Sositsky, who's an artist, is one of the jurors who helped select images for the book. Eve Bend is in charge of marketing, and Glenn Ickler is also a juror. And I just want to mention there were 3 jurors for the written works and 3 for the artwork itself. And then eventually there were a lot of people who contributed. Yes, there were. Yeah. We put out a call, and for 2 months we accepted images and art, images and the written word, and then they were edited. Well, as you noted, we have 10 people on the team, but we have 3 of them here with us today. Why don't we let each one of them introduce themselves and just briefly talk a little bit about their role, and we'll get back to you with a more in-depth discussion later on.
Great. So I'm Reverend Aaron Stockwell-Wiseman. I am the senior minister at First Parish in Framingham. I have been in that role since August of 2020, and I've been a Unitarian Universalist minister since June of 2015. Served congregations here in Massachusetts, Kansas, and Texas.
Brett Peruzzi?
Yes, I'm Brett Peruzzi. I'm a longtime editor and writer. I've also been publishing my own poetry and prose for many years as well. So I came to the project, I think, with a pretty extensive background. And after discussing with Lynne what her objective was, I felt I could really lend a strong hand in guiding this to fruition.
And Joanne?
I'm Joanne Sarkar. I've been a member of the church for decade and a half or so, and I've always been interested in design And so I was very thrilled when I heard from Lynn.
Right.
It's just fun.
Okay, well, let's go back a little deeper with each of you and talk a little bit about your roles. So let's start with Reverend Wiseman. I understand some of your sermons ignited this idea.
Yeah, so back in the spring of 2023 at a Framingham Interfaith Community Association meeting, one of my colleagues mentioned that he was starting to hear a lot about the epidemic of loneliness from a podcast by Dr. Vivek Murthy, the U.S. Surgeon General. And from that, my mind lit on fire for this idea, and I brought it back to our staff, and we came up with a year's worth of programming to really work to reconnect our congregation after the pandemic time, which was a time of social isolation or physical isolation. So we came up with this great series of events, but I knew that the way to inspire us was through the sermons. In my faith tradition, we don't base our sermons off of scripture. It can be more theme-based. So I took a couple of sermons to talk about the effects of loneliness. And the thing I think that people don't realize about loneliness, but are realizing more now, is even though it can be felt mentally, it has physical, it can harm us physically, being alone. Humans are not meant to be alone, and there are a number of effects that it can cause in people's health. So I preach these sermons, in a lot of cases sharing about my own experiences with loneliness. People often feel a shame around being lonely, and I wanted to share a little bit more of a vulnerable side of myself and share that the times that I have felt lonely and how I have sought connection. So from there, from those three sermons, it started to kind of enter into the talk and the conversation of our congregation. And really excited to see this book, to actually hold this book has been just amazing. I'm so proud of the team and all of the contributors.
So loneliness it's kind of something it's personal and it's inside one person.
Yeah.
And then I guess it gets manifested by just a desire or just a feeling trapped to stay at home or not get out.
Exactly. And that's what some social scientists call a cognitive dissonance model, that oftentimes we feel the most lonely after we've had a bad social interaction. We feel that this is the only way that social interactions can be from now on, when in reality, that's just a very isolated event. So reminding people to have an opportunity to really get out, to plan social events. There's a lot in Dr. Vivek Murthy's research on how we end loneliness. So some of that is covered in two of the sermons of mine that are in the book. But we really feel that loneliness, there are three kinds of loneliness, actually. There's intimate loneliness, there's relational loneliness, then there's communal loneliness. And we feel that churches are especially good at ending the communal loneliness and the relational loneliness.
The communal loneliness, isn't that, it's kind of reflected these days in all kinds of groups having membership problems, whether
Absolutely.
it's the Lions Club or the Elks or even the Bo Sox Club, the Red Sox fan club is struggling to get members. And is that because you think people are just kind of locked into staying home, or is it emotional, or in many cases, is it just kind of a pattern that you get yourself into? Oh, it's easier to sit home and watch this on TV or to watch my iPhone, and then all of a sudden I wonder, gee, my life seems boring.
Right. Yeah. I think some of that comes from the research that other people have done, especially Robert Putnam and his book Bowling Alone, charting the decline of civic organizations.
That's going on for a long time.
It sure has.
That's an old book.
Yeah. It's a pretty old book. But so I think as society has gotten so busy, we've started to get away from the extra time that we need to put into civic organizations.
Okay, so we've got all these thoughts in your sermons going together. We've got Lynn thinking about a book on this. Then we get to how are we going to put this into a book and make it attractive, right? And so you need a graphic designer on the team. And how did your role come to be on this, Joanne?
Well, I've been doing graphic design for small things at the church for years now. And I don't know how Lynne knew, but Lynne approached me one Sunday and said, "Hey, we're doing this book."
We have some images that are coming up here that were, I guess, just a few of the ones that were in the book, right?
Yeah, and there were so many. There were so many. Brett did the layout,
Right.
and I followed it, but we made changes over the course of the production. But
Are these images going to be in color in the book, or?
oh yeah,
Yes.
Yeah.
it's full color. It wasn't originally, but fortuitously we did get it in full color. So we have so many beautiful photographs and artworks. We've got full page spreads. We really just have a great variety, poetry.
And so the images were sort of selected to reflect some of the tone of the message. And
They all.
Had you done this in a previous book that you'd worked on, or project?
I have a background as a medical editor.
Oh.
I worked in medical book production years ago, and so I just kind of knew how a book goes together, and I had used the software historically. So it was an interesting learning curve getting to know it.
Yeah. So is there anything else I should ask you about the design of the book here and
well, the cover is by Marianne Orlando. She is actually a prolific artist who is part of our congregation. And I've worked with her many times. We use a lot of her art on our posters and things because it's really eye-catching.
So you get her idea of that, then you have to put some text on it, right? Does that?
Oh yeah.
Where do you put? That's pretty busy.
Oh yeah. Yes, it is busy. But there were some areas that were quieter, so I used those areas at the bottom. I had to crop it, move it a little bit so I could put those words in and they could be read.
And not destroy the art.
Right, exactly. Just the quiet part at the bottom. But I think it's a really striking image for the cover.
So with all these pieces, then we get to the editor here, Brett. So what was involved in editing and assembling all of these stories and images? And
So as Lynne mentioned, this was a juried anthology. We had groups of people that reviewed all of the submissions. We had dozens of submissions. And it was very methodical and organized. Interestingly enough, for an anthology about community, this was all done virtually on the web using Google Docs. But it was superbly organized with Google spreadsheets and lists of submissions. And all the submissions were read probably by most of us multiple times to determine whether they were going to make the cut and actually be in the anthology. And once we had them all selected, then it was up to me as the editor to go in and do a comprehensive copy edit so everything was accurate and consistent across all the different submissions. And then finally, I think as Joanne alluded to, I actually selected the order that they would go in. And what we didn't want to do is make it very static and just have a poetry section, a prose section, an image section. So I interspersed them. It was kind of like assembling a puzzle where I interwove the different pieces and tried to find some connections between them so they led from one to another. And so we'd have a poem, maybe a prose piece, and then an image, and then repeat that pattern, break that pattern up a bit. And I think it comes out to a pretty coherent flowing.
Almost sounds like assembling a symphony.
Yeah, to some extent. It really is an image-based and textual, piece of music, really, when you think about it.
Yes, so as you were describing it, I felt that way, the way they put together repeats of certain things and then change it. And
Absolutely.
All that. So I guess there is an art to the editing process. Did you have to do a lot of word editing getting how many different pieces did you get from individuals?
I think there was about 50, yeah.
Okay. But that ended up in the book?
Close to that, yeah. There was some, of course, that didn't
So
make
everybody's
it through.
writing style is a little different. And
vastly different. Yeah, and that's, again, I want to maintain the artistic integrity of all the pieces, so I don't edit them heavily, because this is creative writing. In some of my other editing roles of editing newspapers or technical materials, marketing materials, you want a unified voice, but here we want everybody's individual voices to come through.
So we end up with a very complicated table of contents. So I think we can show a little image of this here just to give an idea. And I believe this is only a piece of it. So
indeed, it's several pages longer than that. But yeah, so it was a matter of consistency and accuracy was really my goals for the edit, but allowing those individual voices to still come through.
Were there any of the stories that really hit you as you were going through and doing this? Or?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of real nice first-person memoir in there. And, unlike fiction where you're kind of inventing a world, these actually were events in people's real lives. And that's what struck me the most. And I think it's going to be particularly evocative with the readership.
Had you done a project like this before with the...
Not exactly like this. I mean, I've been a contributor to anthologies, and I've edited and reviewed and juried different types of creative writing, but not anything of this scale and scope.
You worked with Lynne on a number of her projects here. And
yes, indeed. We've probably worked on 20 plus books together at this point.
And this is like no other one of your other ones, is it?
No.
Yeah.
It's a first.
Yeah. So when you got all these pieces together, how did you kind of go about assembling to put it together into a book? It sounds like they had pretty much done that for you, but at this point it was a lot of Word documents, I guess. And
well, part of my job, and also Greg Wells, is gathering all the bits and pieces together and presenting them to Brett and to Joanne so that they could do their work. So once Brett had everything edited, then he passed it along to Joanne, and then she put the pieces together to make them look beautiful. She created some design elements and things like that. One thing that I wanted to point out is that not all of the submissions are from people from First Parish. They're from people all over Metro West and beyond. So they're a really diverse group of people, and the biographies of these contributors are also in the back of the book. So people might find that particularly interesting.
How did these people find out about it?
We put out a call for submissions
Okay.
via social media and through our church email newsletter and many other ways.
So then they all get together. Then you had to get a publisher and put on all that to happen, right?
So I'm the actual publisher of the book, and so
I guess I meant a printer or somebody. But so I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yep. So we're working with a print-on-demand printer in Massachusetts, but we've also ordered a bunch of books that people have pre-ordered. And we're going to be having an event coming up on the 17th that Reverend Aaron will talk a little bit more about. But we're going to bring everybody together and present the book and meet the contributors.
So then, to make this really effective, you've got to get the book out to the real world. How does this all happen? How are you going to publish that? You mentioned you had a publicity person on your team, right?
So we're asking all of the contributors to post social media posts about the book. We have an ad in a magazine in regards to that, and I'm going to be sending out a press release to all the clergy in the Metro West area for the official publication date, which is November 6th. And we've been talking it up in other venues, other websites, et cetera. And those are most of the ways that we're doing that. We're trying to do things without spending money, but through a broad way of reaching people like social media.
So let's talk a little bit about this event that's going to be on the 17th. How is that going to, this book is sort of a part of you mentioned, Reverend, before about this being a part of your sermon and part of a theme for the year for the parish. Yeah. Is this event kind of intended to kind of build on that and have the book as one piece of the event, sort of?
Absolutely. So on November 17th at First Parish, 24 Vernon Street here in Framingham, it's actually two different events. The first is our worship service, which is at 10:30. We'll be featuring some of the poems that are in the book, as well as a brief sermon by myself. And it's the poetry part of it, because I think that's something that people can hear once and understand, and all of them are shorter. If it were the essays and the memoirs, it'd be a longer service. And then at 11:30 rather, we will have a kind of a celebration of this publication in our fellowship hall in Scott Hall, also at 24 Vernon Street, and people can get the book signed by the contributors, and it will be a chance for all of us to kind of be together and celebrate this pretty awesome event and this accomplishment.
So just to get this date and time and place out there again, this is going to be
November 17th at First Parish in Framingham.
At what time?
At 10:30 for the worship service, and then 11:30 for the celebration.
And and you're going to publicize this so people will find out about it online and offline, and the Metro West News, if it still exists.
Yes.
Yes.
And largely through word of mouth of your own parishioners, probably. And you're looking for people beyond just First Parish to come to this, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's been a lot of interest in other clergy as well, hearing about our project. So they're pretty excited.
Well, the subject here, let's just, now that we've kind of talked on the mechanics of all this, why don't we just talk a little more? You touched on it a lot at the beginning, but how does this issue of loneliness correction serve a purpose in the community? Is there a way? Can we all just do we all have some thoughts on that? Start with you, Aaron.
Sure. So I think this isn't a thing that happened because of the pandemic. This was the path that United States society was going down long before. The pandemic and our time of physical isolation really poured gas on the fire for that. But I think it's really key that we work to rebuild connection in the community. It's what all democracies are based off of, the good, strong connection. Because when you know your neighbor, you can trust your neighbor as well. So I think that's really key. And it's a tough time to be a congregation right now. There are so many other things that you could do on a Sunday or a Saturday. You can seek inspiration elsewhere on a hike, or listening to a TED Talk, or watching the television, but it's the community that is missing from all of those things.
So do we all have some kind of a personal story here of loneliness? I mean, I think to myself, after my wife passed away, I certainly felt some of that. Yeah. And my need then was just to find somebody to just go out with, and just go to a movie or go to a show, and just somebody, I don't like going to a concert by myself. Right. So I reached out, and I went to an online dating site. And next thing I know, I was finding people to go out and do things with. And I was sitting home by myself. I was feeling angry after I got over some of the hard, the internal sympathy that I had, loss and all that. Any of you have any experiences with this? I know you all have your personal experiences here.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind for me, I've been a Framingham resident for 25 years now, but I grew up on the South Shore of Boston, and I really didn't know a lot of people out here. So I experienced a lot of loneliness at that time, and it was 1999, so the web was around, but it wasn't as pervasive as it is today. And I started going out and doing a lot of in-person things, and one of them was going to poetry open mics. And I've met people, I've developed some very strong friendships, because being a writer tends to be a solitary practice, but I've joined several writing groups, and I've developed some very strong friendships out of those. So that was one of my kind of legs up, in entering the Metro West
work
community.
at home does kind of lead to a sense of loneliness. Even before, when you go to the office and you'd see the same people all the time, you'd be with a team of people. And did you have some experience like this, Lynne, or is this an unfair question you weren't ready for?
Oh, well, I mean, I too have been in Framingham for 25, 26 years. And I noticed loneliness as my daughter grew up, because as she kind of got more independent, I was less needed. And I never went to social things with her. Like, there were no more brownies or Girl Scouts, no more gymnastics. That was where I knew everybody. And once she got to be, 17, 18, I realized I didn't have any friends outside of those people.
I'm sorry, Joanne, I called you Lynn, but
That's okay.
but now let me ask Lynn. I mean, you've been a photographer and done all kinds of stuff. That's kind of an internal business as well. I mean, yeah.
Well, it is, and what I like to do is bring people together, and that's who I am. And one of the things that I realized is I read a book by Tommy Orange, and he said that by sharing your own story, it can bring other people, it can help connect people, because by sharing, you're inviting people to know your story. And there was one woman who contributed to this book that I did not know. And she basically said, I'm an older handicapped woman. And she submitted 2 pieces of artwork, which are actually in the book. And she said it really resonated with her, and she was so glad to contribute. And it helped her feel like she was part of the community. And that just really made me feel great.
Well, you touched on one person here. Were there others that, as the two of you read through these, or that kind of hit you, that were stories of this, that you felt this book was really going to help this person? The stories aren't success stories, right? They're not people saying how they overcame loneliness, are they? Or are they I had a problem and I recognized it, and this is what I did? Is that sort of the way it flows?
There are success stories in there. There's several very moving pieces about people that experienced profound loss and were able to recover from it, through community and reaching out to people. So I don't think it's as much people just suffering. There is redemption in a lot of the stories as well.
Aaron, were some of these stories something that's going to ignite some of your thoughts on some of your future sermons even?
I think so. And I think also just the connection that's being built around this project will continue to ignite more sermons and inspire more of them. Some of the poems are certainly going to inspire the sermon on the 17th. So that'll be exciting, maybe nerve-wracking as well for me and the poets that submitted work to know that work is inspiring the sermon.
It certainly isn't just a Framingham problem, and I guess you're hopeful that this book will get some movement outside here, right? And is that sort of what your effort is with the publicity part of this and connecting that, Lynn?
Yes, and
Yeah.
I'm hoping that it gets people talking and sharing and connecting.
So if somebody wants to get one of these books, and that we hope this interview show will get out on YouTube and get some connection there too. But are you going to have a website or something that's going to?
Well, people can order the book from our
I
distributor.
think we have an image here of the website.
Yes, they can order it directly, and a copy will be sent right to their home. We also will have some extra copies at the 17th at our event on November 17th as well. But anyone can order from Silver Street Media and have the book sent right to their home.
Will the book be available on Amazon?
Yes.
And
After November 6th, which is the publication.
Are you thinking of doing any book talks at a place like Barnes and Noble, where they have
We're working on it.
author things, and some of the other their independent bookstores are harder and harder to find these days? But there's one in South Westboro, I know, that's very
Yes,
good.
and they will be carrying our book as
good.
well. And we're looking at also having an art exhibit with some of the images from the book that travel around to different locations, libraries, etc.
Okay. Well, the half hour is rapidly passing by. Is there anything here any last thoughts that any of you might have that you might want to just use as a wrap up? Aaron, any thoughts here for you? Did we cover what you wanted to?
I think we did. I think the key with this collection of stories on loneliness and hope and connection is it goes back to what I was saying earlier. Oftentimes people think that they are lonely and that no one else is feeling this way. And I hope that the work that these authors have done reminds people that you are not alone. We're better when we're in community, and being in community can be tough. It can be tough to make that first leap into a new community, but there are people who are there ready and raring to meet you. It can take some time, but they're there.
With probably some of the same issues themselves that you didn't know about.
Absolutely.
Invariably. Yeah. Well, this has been great, and I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight, and I want to thank you all for the work that you did. This has been a great project. I hope that you'll get lots of people at your November 17th event at the First Parish Church in Framingham at 11 a.m. And then the show, if you're viewing the show after that, check out this book. It's going to be available online and lots of other places. And so, by the way, come back and watch the show again next week. Well, we'll have the book up in our bookcase. But we're on Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays in Framingham, and the show is available on the internet as well on YouTube. So thanks for watching, and check out this. It's a great project. Good night.
Thank you.